in a conventional farm, it's a monoculture. So it's one crop planted over and over again for miles. So there's really like a limited number of products coming off that farm.
Yeah.
Versus regenerative agriculture, it's this diversity of crops being produced on that land. So a diversity of companies can come around the table and co-support that farm and help scale and replicate them.
You're listening to Granite Goodness, the podcast where we interview New Hampshire people making the world a better place.
Oh, Susie, where are you going now?
My name is Andy DeMeo. Today, I'm speaking to my friend Zach Angelini. Zach is the co-founder of Public Good Provisions, where he helps companies find the best way toward supply chains based on regenerative agriculture. We talk about helping salamanders cross the road, optimism, the environmentalism movement, rubber farms in Thailand, improving the world instead of harming it less, carbon footprints, the philosopher Charles Eisenstein, Chaga tea, and a ton of other stuff I hope you enjoy on this episode of Granite Goodness. Zach.
Hello, Andy.
Welcome to Granite Goodness.
Yes, I am very excited to be here.
We're sitting here in bucolic Newmarket, New Hampshire. We're outside on Zach's porch.
Yes.
He insisted that we record out here, which was clearly the right decision.
Yes.
Because it's amazing out. And there's going to be some ambient background noise of birds and the trees and the river, and it's all very fitting.
It's perfect.
And below us is your sauna.
Yes.
Which we may end up recording in.
I think that should be a goal.
Point. Yeah. If not this episode, then a future episode.
Perfect.
It'll be like 8 minutes in the sauna. Eight minutes of optimism in the sauna. That's
yes.
In New Hampshire. That's the name of the game. Well, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
I feel like I say this for every guest, but I've known from the moment that I started this thing that I have to have you on here.
I'm honored. Thank you.
And we begin with like 9 straight minutes of just buttering up.
Love it.
The guests.
Beautiful.
Yeah. You are a friend of mine, but you have been a mentor and an inspiration. We met when I was in college.
Yes.
I was an intern or something for a graduate
research project
that you were doing.
Yes.
About ocean plastic pollution.
Exactly.
Does that feel like a long time ago to you?
It does and it doesn't. I feel like it feels like another world, but it also like such a blur how quickly things have gone by since then.
Do you find yourself talking about that experience to people a lot?
For sure. I mean, yeah, I feel like the what led to that research project was a research job that I had in Australia that was very informative career-wise. So that's something my family makes fun of me for talking about Australia too much.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, so this is like a little conspiratorial.
Love it. Let's go.
Well, I had another guest on here. So you're an engineer by training.
Yep.
Right. And I had someone else on here who also is an engineer by training. Mm-hmm. And I swear to God, I have met like 4 really intelligent, funny people who have this intersection between either they're Australian, they spent a lot of time in Australia, and they are engineers.
Interesting.
They've studied engineering.
It's interesting. I feel like it definitely draws people who are passionate about the outdoors and nature, so it's kind of makes sense.
There must be something going on there.
Right.
So you had this experience, and that led you to being concerned about plastic pollution, and this was kind of your grad project.
Yeah. I feel like, so I studied as you know, studied environmental engineering at UNH, and towards the end of that degree, as I started to get like internships and whatnot, I was realizing that I wasn't super passionate about the typical environmental engineering path.
Yeah.
And so luckily I had an amazing advisor, Dr. Nancy Kinner, who was really just helpful in many ways in kind of figuring out where I wanted to take that degree. And she had this research project in Australia, which I was obviously like, hell yes. I kind of couldn't believe when
Get
she
me
said
outta
it.
here.
It was the job was literally surveying beaches along the entire south coast of Australia.
That sounds like fake. It sounds like a fake job.
It's like it shouldn't have been real. I got to go and like with this team and these cool like Land Rover type vehicles to these super remote beaches and camp
Science.
on the beaches. Yeah, exactly. I was like, no way.
Don't forget your suntan lotion.
Yes. And so that was just like a very cool experience, but got me really interested in seeing that, okay, like this problem of marine pollution. We were also doing research around like oil spill response. So kind of seeing that these problems that we're either studying or working to fix, they're all, the root of them is like big business, like corporations.
Yeah.
And so that got me really interested in corporate sustainability, and just kind of being like, okay, I want to get on the inside of like where these problems are coming from and
Sure.
try to like create change from there. So that it was very informative and kind of like the path that I took from there.
I mean, I was digging into that because that's how we met, which obviously is the big event of your life.
Yeah, biggest for sure.
But we should probably talk more about professionally what your passions and skills are. Because you are, I mean, it is, I feel so lucky to have someone like you as a close friend because, I don't know, I get spoiled. Like, you're on all these things. You're on, like, this green biz 30 under 30 list. Like, you're just one of these super smart, accomplished people who just, like, manages to do it all and is so stylish at the same time.
I don't know about that, but
you know, so, but yeah, tell me, maybe explain a little bit for the audience. What is it exactly that you do now? I know that you're at an organization called Public Good Provisions. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I guess just kind of to connect the dots of what led me to starting Public Good Provision. So basically after that Australia experience, coming back, meeting Andy, biggest event of my life.
When you first said that, I was like, wait, meeting and who? Tell me about this great mentor.
But yeah, so during that time I came back to UNH and to get my grad degree and really kind of like hone my focus more into that corporate sustainability space.
Yeah.
And got connected with at UNH there's a sustainability institute that is like kind of bridges that the like science of sustainability with business.
Yeah.
So met Fiona Wilson, who you know
She's
as well.
been on. If the viewers have been diligent and listening, they are well acquainted.
Amazing.
But you should still explain, because it is cool to hear different, like, force of the guests so far are quite affiliated with UNHSI. But I think it's very worth and interesting to hear, like, you all do such different things.
Yeah.
So it's not
that's
redundant
cool.
to hear you explain, like, this is what I think UNHSI is about. Fiona,
Totally.
that's what she thinks is about. Fana, like, so anyway, I just interrupted you.
Yeah,
but
no, that's awesome.
it's a cool detail to note on.
That's good to know. Yeah. So yeah, she really helped me figure out how to, like I said, kind of bridge like the more technical science of sustainability and think about how to take that into corporations and how you affect change in the business world and translate that more technical science into what can be like actionable for a company. So I got introduced to that concept through her. I'm trying to think where there's so much I could go into with that.
No, I mean, you could talk. I know you were at Timberland for a little while.
Yeah. So okay. So yeah, I'll go that route. So, so then while I was getting that grad degree, Fiona and the Sustainability Institute hosted a like guest lecture where a woman, Margaret Maury Runer, who was another just great mentor for me, she worked for Timberland, and she was speaking about a really cool project in Haiti where Timberland had gone in and worked with farmers in Haiti to develop a organic cotton supply chain there. And so that was just super exciting to learn about. It definitely combined a lot of passions of kind of like international sustainable development and corporate sustainability, and was just super exciting to me. And I went up and chatted with Margaret after that, and she was amazing and just kind of became a mentor and helping me kind of get an in at Timberland. And then ended up doing through the Sustainability Institute, they had it's called the Changemaker Collaborative now, but it's basically an internship program that places UNH students with companies in the area and all over, I think now, working in sustainability. And so I got an internship with Timberland to do basically life cycle assessment work for their products. So should I explain life cycle assessment maybe? Or
I mean, yes, because this has happened before where someone has said something and I don't interject. Well, oh God, Zach's holding up. We should preface. I did ask him before this to make me. He offered me some chaga tea, and you were like, "I can spike it." I'm gonna say that it was your idea.
Than just mushroom tea.
Yeah. So I haven't had it yet. So I'm gonna
Cheers.
Can we clink?
Yes.
Cheers to chaga.
Yes, locally foraged.
And are you kidding?
Yeah.
Oh my God. You're spoiling me. This isn't even this is the most ridiculous episode of this podcast, and I'm loving it.
How is it?
It's very good. Chaga. Please explain life cycle assessment.
So life cycle assessment is basically a quantitative way to understand the environmental impacts of creating a product across its entire life cycle. So they say from like cradle to grave. So that's from the extraction of the raw materials that go into the product, all of the processing, refinement of those materials, and the manufacturing of those materials into a product, the transportation of that product to the consumer, the use of that product, and then the end of life. Like what happens? Is it thrown away? Is it recycled?
Yeah.
So basically quantitatively measures the environmental impacts that happen at all of those stages, and then tells you, okay, here are the stages where the largest environmental impacts are happening. So that's where you have basically like the biggest levers for change. And so doing that work as an intern eventually evolved into a full-time role with Timberland, managing their environmental sustainability work. And basically as we were doing that type of life cycle assessment work across the whole business and all of their products, it became really clear that the area where Timberland had the largest impacts was at the very early stages of the supply chain, that like extraction of raw materials, which for most of Timberland products is agriculture. So it's the growing of those materials. Think like raising cattle that the leather comes from, growing cotton, growing wool, growing natural rubber, a few others. Those are the top ones.
Sure, the heavy hitters.
Yeah. And so that led to this focus for me around regenerative agriculture as a way to reduce those impacts at the agricultural stage, but actually kind of go beyond reducing impacts and heal and restore the lands where those materials are coming from.
Right. This is another good area that I kind of want you to dig into and explain to a layperson. Imagine someone knows nothing about this.
Yep.
Why is regenerative necessary? Like what's wrong with just, growing some cattle, taking the leather, turning it into a product, or or a cotton? Like what goes wrong in your view?
Yeah, so there's a lot of impacts that occur at the agricultural stage when using conventional industrial agriculture techniques. So a lot of more large-scale conventional agriculture is very chemical intensive. it can lead to wide-scale degradation of land. There's some really scary statistics, like 70% of the world's soils globally have been degraded.
Right.
And the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that there's only 60 harvests left if that rate of soil degradation continues.
Yikes.
So pretty like scary stats. And there's even, I've read like a lot of interesting anthropology type books that actually look at how the rise and fall of civilizations can actually be really closely correlated with the degradation of soil over time. Yeah, because obviously like you need soil to feed people, and large scale agriculture, conventional agriculture, degrades that soil, basically like strips the nutrients out of the soil without kind of putting something back.
Right.
And so regenerative agriculture kind of flips that story of agriculture on its head, and it's not something that's new. It's based on indigenous practices, and a lot of people are still practicing regenerative techniques. They might not call it regenerative agriculture, but they're working in a way that builds and restores the soil rather than kind of degrading the soil. But basically the whole exciting opportunity with regenerative agriculture is that it's a way of farming that's actually, it's mimicking nature. So it's like kind of like a form of biomimicry, looking at mimicking natural processes and basically optimizing the ability of plants and animals to pull carbon out of the atmosphere and store it in the soil, which is what plants and animals actually naturally do. They're a major part of the natural carbon cycle.
Sure.
So it optimizes their ability to do that and basically pulls carbon out of the atmosphere where we don't want it, and stores it in the soil where we actually do want carbon. So when you have more carbon in your soil, you have healthier soil, it's more productive. It actually forms kind of like a sponge-like structure. So when it rains, the soil holds more water. So if you have droughts, it can resist droughts better. It also is more resilient to flooding. So when you have too much rain, it doesn't wash all the soil away. There's all kinds of cool benefits, and it has benefits for farmers in rural communities as well, because it basically is a way to get farmers off of the need for expensive industrial chemical inputs, like chemical fossil fuel based fertilizers or chemical pesticides, fungicides, herbicides. Basically with regenerative agriculture, as you build the health of the soil provides all of those functions that you would otherwise need those expensive chemical inputs for. So it has a ton of potential as this like really cool win-win-win solution that can really solve a lot of the issues that we're facing. And I think for me, I got super excited about it because in sustainability, I don't know if you felt this too, like a lot of times it can be very doom and gloom. It can be very like this is really bad. How do we be a little less bad?
Why do you think we're here?
Yeah, exactly.
This is what we're doing.
Yes.
This is what the Chaga's
Granted
for.
Goodness. Yes. So what I got excited about it because it wasn't just like, okay, how do we just pollute a little less or degrade a little less? It was like, no, there's actually a way to operate a business that heals and restores the beautiful places that these materials come from. So to me, that was like, just a really exciting proposition.
You were attracted to that, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I think I am obsessed with everything you just said, by the way. But the thing it's kind of pinging for me, right, is there is this really, I don't know, sad narrative built in to a lot of the ways we talk about sustainability. And in my experience, in my perspective, right, that's so zero sum, right? And particularly when we talk about, growing the economy and building wealth, as though that is categorically opposed to living in a way that lessens our environmental impact, right? And what I love about work that you do, right, and being alive today, like you, to me, are on the cutting edge of this entire enchilada, right? This extraordinary time in human history where, we're here and it's like, hey, we've got 8 billion people. They all deserve a quality of life that is good and as good as, ours, for example. How do we do that while not, destroying a bunch of stuff? And the fact that there are so many ways to do that, right? Like by relying on new tech or, rediscovering or relearning some things that other cultures and civilizations have known for a long time, right? Like, it's a very, very fascinating world that you do a great job of explaining.
I'm obsessed with everything you just said, and it reminded me of a quote I'm just looking up on my phone.
Yeah, pull it up. No, I want to hear it.
This is from
Chaga Sip.
A guy that I heard. He gave a keynote speech at a conference called the Regenerative Earth Summit, which was a big part of what like introduced me to regenerative agriculture. I don't really know how to describe it. He's like an environmental scientist / philosopher. His name's Charles Eisenstein, but do you know
I know him.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm
We're
obsessed.
big fans of him.
Oh, amazing.
But tell me the quote anyway.
He has so many good quotes. I have like a whole list on my phone of his quotes.
He's a very thoughtful guy.
Yeah. So he goes, I disagree with the environmentalist idea that we're going to have to make do with less. In reality, we're going to have to make do with more. More beauty, more community, more fulfillment, more art, more music, and more material objects that are fewer in number but richer in aesthetics.
Hell yeah.
Right?
He's on it.
I just love that because I like you said, I think there is this like net zero sum game or kind of like scarcity language applied to sustainability when it's like, no, this is actually about like more beauty, more. It's not about like we have to suffer to be sustainable.
What's tragic, and I think a very valid critique of a lot of the modern sustainability movement, right, is, you know, like if you get really into the carbon accounting stuff and the footprinting stuff, like it's great, but if you take that logic to its rational conclusion, the most environmentally friendly thing to do is just to die.
Right.
Which is like, who wants to, like, that's not a productive way to think. That's not a good answer. And that also has the virtue of like not being true, as we know. Like there is this long history of people, you know, living abundant, good lives, you know, in a way that's less kind of disruptive to the other beings who live on planet Earth.
And
this is the Chaga talking now.
Yes. Not even just less disruptive. That's reminding me of another quote that I'm going to butcher, but I was reading a book called Braiding Sweetgrass, which I would like super recommend to anybody. Yeah. But it basically just like talks about how every the language it uses is like every animal or species in nature has a unique gift to give. And so that gift is also their responsibility to the environment, like in just the relationships between different animals, and one animal is good at this and that in some way, you know, the like ripple effect that has. So it's basically saying that humans should think about, what gift are we giving to the environment? We shouldn't just like try to exist less, but actually think about how we can exist in a way that brings more abundance and life to the world around us, basically.
Well, I think there are plenty of examples of that, you know, where, I mean, something I've read the book, and one of the things that struck me about it was Kimmerer is someone who is as aware as anyone, right, of, you know, any of the complex environmental issues facing the world. But she was teaching her class one day, and this, I'm like going to paraphrase this, but, you know, she was asking the class, or they were trying to have a discussion or something about, hey, like, let's talk about examples of people coexisting or having a positive relationship with the environment. And, you know, her class of undergraduates didn't have anything to say. This idea was foreign to them, right? And she came away from there. She basically was like, well, look, we got problems, but the idea that human beings are a cancer on planet Earth that's not true. It doesn't have to be that way.
Exactly.
You know, and so I think that I understood that to be part of her motivation for writing that book.
Oh, that's so cool. I didn't know that.
I might have made that up.
Well, I love it.
I think it's there's some section like that in the beginning, but, you know, it gets at something that's underneath all this, right? Do you find yourself often having similar conversations? Because your whole world is people like in the environmentalist field. Is this still a difficult thing for people to wrap their heads around, right? That we don't have to fully retreat from, I don't know, modernity, and that, you know, maybe there's like a third way where we can grow businesses, we can have nice products that people want, et cetera, all the things that are good about, you know, the marketplace of innovation and business and all that stuff, just with less of a cost. What does that intellectual landscape look like in your world?
It's a good question. I think that I don't think it's like the mainstream. I think the mainstream is still in more of that
Doomland.
Doomland that we discussed, and just how to reduce negative impacts versus how can businesses operate in a way that do genuinely like give back, not as a little side philanthropic thing, but like as a core function of their business.
Yeah.
I think that's where I definitely see the space going. I feel like it's more, it's not the mainstream, but it's like the trend where I definitely see things going. Like there's some signals, I guess, like there was a guy named Paul Pullman he's the ex-CEO, I think, of Unilever, one of those giant companies that owns a bunch of companies.
Sounds like a big deal.
Yeah. And he wrote a book called Net Positive that it's like exactly this concept. And he like pretty much like most of the sustainability conferences I've been to, I feel like he's been a keynote speaker at a bunch of them. So
Sure.
I think this is like starting to get out there. And I do think like regenerative agriculture has brought this way of thinking more. It's making it more into the mainstream. Like a lot of the sustainability conferences, there's like a couple big ones that every company goes to, like Sustainable Brands or Green Biz, and they're like, you can just since I started, so say like I started working in the like whatever corporate world 7-ish years ago or 8 years ago, and when I started, like there was no mention of regeneration or net positive. Now, like if you look at the agendas of any of those conferences, like you're going to see regenerative and net positive mentioned throughout. How much is like truly legit versus just like jumping on the bandwagon of the word is definitely up for question. But there's definitely, I think, a growing amount of focus on this idea of like net positivity versus just being a little less bad.
Right. That can be true of any kind of new intellectual movement. You know, AI is such a buzzword now.
Right.
Companies will change their business pitch and description to be like, we do AI, when really they maybe don't.
Exactly.
And it's like, it can mean anything. But, you know, over time, the real performers stand out.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're in that category.
Wow,
you know,
thank you.
Well, you came at this from like you're driven by the science,
mm-hmm.
right? And, you know, see the potential impact. And I love that for you, this is, it's just like such a holistic way of thinking, right? Philanthropy is great, but I feel like I always use the phrase big enchilada, but the big enchilada is the private sector.
Great phrase.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, how do we get those folks on board
mm-hmm.
with doing this? If someone came to you and they said, hey, the environment is great, social impact is great, but I'm here to make money,
mm-hmm.
what would you say to them?
I need to think about the right way to articulate this, but basically this is kind of a newer thought I've been having. So just the way that we think about innovation, I think, is how we should think about sustainability. So I think in innovation, there's a lot of understanding that something might be harder, more complicated, more expensive, whatever, at the beginning.
Yeah.
But there's no question that there's like a financial opportunity around innovation and like capturing market share, brand loyalty, all of those things, like attention towards your brand, etc. I think there's a major opportunity to just position sustainability as that. It's like, it is, doing anything new is more expensive, complicated, etc. at the beginning, but there's a major opportunity to do that work.
Yeah.
And like, I think same with innovation, just like starting a new type of supply chain or new technology might be more expensive at the start. Once you get to efficiencies of scale, it could actually be cheaper and more efficient than the old way. It's the same thing with sustainability.
Right. Yeah, there are a lot of strong fundamentals supporting many of these transitions. The parlance we use in my field of work is the transition to a more sustainable economy. But it's true. It's totally true. And, you know, I feel like there are already so many things, particularly when you look at the way that scientific innovation has transformed the world, there are already more things today that are true that would have been considered pie in the sky, impossible, not very long ago, right? And so we have found a lot of ways to create better products, that are more durable, more versatile,
Exactly.
from actually less environmental inputs, right? Underpinning it all is that fallacy of the zero sum
Exactly.
kind of, inputs, outputs. If you could talk to yourself at the beginning of your entry into this world, what would you say?
Oh, it's like a good question, but a tough question, because I feel like I'm of this mindset of thinking back to the different challenges. It's like, yeah, that was, difficult or whatever, or could have been better maybe, but it led to it was all whatever important in kind of where things have landed today. But
like all good innovation.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess just something that I'm thinking about a lot now is, I think this would probably be advice I would give, is to I think I leaned more heavily on technical skills than more I guess soft skills in my career early, because it was almost like a comfort area, or I think it was more maybe something to prove, I guess, in just whatever, those technical skills in my networks seeming more valued.
Yeah.
Whereas I think my nature and maybe more my natural gifts, I guess, are probably more soft skills.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to now blend those things. I've been trying to be very, now that I have my own business, be very reflective of what am I truly energized to do? What are my kind of more natural skill sets that I can lean into? Thinking back to that Kimmerer quote from Braiding Sweetgrass of what are my gifts and therefore my responsibilities to the world. So yeah, I think I would say read Braiding Sweetgrass. And yeah, I guess just try to lean more into those
the soft skills.
Those soft skills, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think and that's also just part of my, I guess, quote unquote theory of change, that the science is super important, but I do think that people have to be excited, energized, inspired in order to make change. That's something that I saw really clearly working at Timberland, or just in the corporate world, of that you can share all the science you want, but if you're not really energizing, exciting, inspiring people that this is mission possible, it can be done, and tapping into their sense of wonder and awe and all those things, people who are inspired will listen to the science,
right,
and will educate themselves. So yeah, that's just something I've been thinking about a lot.
And when you say focusing on the things that really energize you, what is that?
That it's a good question. I feel like it's something that I'm currently really trying to hone. I think I have a very general idea, but it especially in having my own business now, trying to really hone that and only take projects that are as aligned as possible with that.
Yeah.
And I do think I am energized by getting people excited about sustainability and seeing someone become hopeful.
Sure.
It's very energizing to me of no, this is possible, and getting them excited and tapping into some of those feelings of wonder and awe in nature. That's something that I've been realizing is very exciting to me.
You work with figuring out supply chains, right? Which are as complicated a thing that exists as anything. Tell me how wrong this is, right? But someone comes to you with a project and say, hey, we have a supply chain for our company and we want it to be better. We have no idea what to do. You know how to tackle that problem at the very least, right?
Yeah.
You come to them with a roadmap and say, well, if you want to get, cotton or leather or something or other, this is the way to do it that's intentional and conscious.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
That is a lot. That is a lot of what we do now and what I've done in the past. And I think like a nuance to that I've realized I'm actually more interested in starting at the source versus starting with like the end customer. Like,
sure.
So like in our company, we've done a lot of business consulting and how to build regenerative supply chains. I think through the process though, I've learned I'm actually more excited and energized by identifying those like amazing regenerative farms and then basically like finding what brand would be a good fit to like pull that through the supply chain and create a cool product with. And it's like very similar but nuanced, I guess.
Yeah.
But I just like an example of I think like the type of work that I get really excited about. So probably my favorite project that I worked on at Timberland was a regenerative rubber project. So most people, I feel like when, at least for me, when I heard rubber, I just would think of like synthetic rubber.
Like
but
a
there's
car
also
tire.
there's also, well, even car tires. Most rubber is a mix of synthetic rubber and natural rubber. And natural rubber is tapped in liquid form from a rubber tree, just like maple syrup is trapped from a maple tree. And then it's like processed and turned into whatever. A tire has a mix of both. But those rubber farms, typically when rubber trees are grown conventionally, there's hugely negative impacts. So there's, if people are familiar with the negative impacts of like palm oil production,
Sure, yeah.
It's the same as that. There's clear cutting of really beautiful, diverse tropical rainforests in order to plant a monoculture of rubber trees. So monoculture is just like one species of tree planted, kind of sparsely planted over and over again, which is like not something that you see in nature. It's susceptible to pests. You have to use a ton of pesticides and chemical fertilizers to like prop up that system. But we kind of in exploring the options within our supply chain, we found a really amazing program in Thailand that was growing regenerative rubber trees. So they're basically planting rubber trees in a dynamic agroforestry approach. So it's intercropped with all other different species of trees. They're basically mimicking a natural rainforest.
Wow.
And so they're actually taking degraded land and restoring it to more abundance. In the like, there's so much amazing like data on the carbon sequestration potential of that and the improvements in biodiversity and like all of that. But the thing that I saw like really get people excited about using that material was actually just this iPhone video that we had captured, where it was just through like the audio of the video showing the difference in the sounds of the regenerative forest versus the conventional monoculture farm. Like on the conventional monoculture farm, you hear like one bird chirp every like few seconds. And then on the regenerative farm, you hear this like crazy chorus of like life and like all these like beautiful jungle like rainforest sounds. And it was just so clear how one is like so full of life and abundant versus the other. And just seeing like that is what got people like really excited about the project and willing to do the extra work it would take to like get that material into our supply chain. Because anytime you're getting a new material into a supply chain, it is just like more work. And until it becomes like standard business practices at the beginning, it is always going to be more work. So you need to like, just working internally at a company, you need to get people really like excited and like want to be a part of that, to do that extra work to make it be a success. So I feel like that's the type of thing that energizes me most.
it's such a beautiful example of the feedback loop, right? I feel as though it's easy for people to feel depressed about the impact that they can have as a consumer, right? Even the word consumer kind of has this, like you can read into that, right? And
totally.
it's just like, who wants to think of themselves as, oh, I'm just consuming. And
right.
the beautiful thing about, the modern world and like we can design these supply chains is these people are out there making this product and they want to market for it. Like they're putting in the effort to do it in this very intentional way, believing that someone will want what they're selling. And the more that is the case, as you say, then it becomes standard, right? Tell me more about your business.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I never quite made it there.
How did it get started exactly?
Totally. Yeah. So basically, as I was at Timberland and realizing I was super passionate about regenerative agriculture and just seeing like, okay, this is, to me, like, I believe where the most kind of positive impact can happen. In a lot of my job, my role was to lead global sustainability, which was quite like broad. There's a lot within that, but I was spending probably like 80 to 90% of my time on regenerative agriculture.
Yeah.
Because both that's where a lot of Timberland's impact was, but also I was just really, really passionate about it. And basically my role became helping to build these new supply chains for regeneratively grown materials for Timberland and their parent company, VF Corporation. And I basically saw that like, okay, we could get a pilot supply chain built. We could get like a pinnacle product out in the marketplace, like small run pinnacle product in the marketplace. That was, I mean, it was difficult, but it was like doable. But to get past that point of like pinnacle product launch to actually like having those materials embedded in our like core product lines, like where you would really have impact at scale, there were all these like similar barriers that we would kind of like hit in every project around like cost and mostly cost.
Right.
And I started to see that like, okay, like we're hitting this wall and like there's this opportunity. It's just like a very chicken and egg scenario of like, as we grow, the cost will come down, but like we're hitting this wall of growing because of where the cost is currently.
Right.
Like, how are we going to get around this? And I ended up, at a conference meeting my now business partner, Gina Nagel, who formerly, she was the VP of Mission and Regenerative Agriculture for Applegate, which is...
Yeah, I know that company. I get some of my meat there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, people probably see them in the grocery store, but I believe they're the largest natural organic like processed meat company in the U.S. And Gina was leading a lot of work on transitioning their supply chain to regenerative agriculture, especially for their beef. So I heard Gina talking at this conference about all the work she was doing to like help Applegate source more regenerative beef and the challenges and barriers they were facing, and was just like, oh wow, this is exactly what we're trying to do and the exact same barriers that we're facing. And so connected with her, and we set up a partnership between Timberland and Applegate to work on co-sourcing their, like, it comes from the same animal, the leather for our shoes and the beef for their hot dogs together. And as a result, we were able to basically align our requirements for sourcing regenerative, which made it easier for farmers to meet the requirements, because one of the big issues is all these different companies taking like different parts of an animal or different things a farmer is growing. They're all asking for slightly different, like nuanced certifications or data or whatever. So we said, okay, like we're on the same page, we're asking for the same thing. And then we were able to go in and better kind of like grow regenerative supply chains collectively, showing farmers that like we have both of these like end customers at the table. We're both could cost share the investments into building those like regenerative supply chains. We could cost share the premium on the material that we're sourcing, because like if just Timberland is looking for regenerative leather, all of the premium is going to be put on the leather, versus if there's a customer for the leather and the beef, then the like cost premium is shared. So it's basically like, okay, if companies within industries that typically never talk to each other just talk to each other.
Right.
They can share all of the like costs and burdens of scaling regenerative agriculture.
Right.
So we set up that partnership. We started to see other examples of like, wow, this idea of like
collective bargaining.
Basically,
yeah.
like the collaborative
Yeah.
utilization, collaborative sourcing, like cross-industry partnerships is actually what can scale and get us past that chicken or an egg scenario.
Yeah.
And scale regenerative agriculture. And it's a win-win solution because we don't compete over the end materials. We can invest in a supply chain and then
Right.
take different materials because we're in different industries.
Wow.
And so we started to see that with like the rubber project that I mentioned. Those rubber trees are intercropped with coffee trees. So we were setting up conversations with large coffee companies. Same thing, like cotton, regenerative cotton can be grown in rotation or intercropped with different vegetable crops or nuts and things like that. So just tons of opportunities for the fashion and like clothing industry to partner with the food industry to co-invest and just scale regenerative agriculture way quicker than any one company could on their own. So that like led us to branching off from our companies and starting Public Good Provisions, which has the goal to basically, the ultimate goal is to form what we're calling regenerative buying coalitions. So companies like across industries that typically don't interact with each other,
Yeah.
forming partnerships to co-source and co-invest into regenerative agriculture. And the exciting thing is that like regenerative agriculture lends itself to collaboration.
Right.
Because just like there's in a conventional farm, it's a monoculture. So it's one crop planted over and over again for miles. So there's really like a limited number of products coming off that farm.
Yeah.
Versus regenerative agriculture, it's this diversity of crops being produced on that land. So a diversity of companies can come around the table and co-support that farm and help scale and replicate them.
That's like the coolest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Nice.
What you just said. Like, that's insane. Oh my God. Why doesn't everyone want to solve this problem? Like, why? I mean, you just explained. I don't know why everyone doesn't think that's the most fascinating thing in the world.
It is crazy that it really does come down to like just different industries just don't talk to each other. And they just need to talk to each other.
But isn't that wonderful though? You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
It's two sides. It's
Right.
gosh, this is so avoidable.
Mm-hmm.
But the solution, not that it's like, I mean, this is deeply complex stuff, obviously, but
Yeah, for sure.
wow, a big part of this is a completely preventable, as you say,
Mhm.
it's kind of like it's a soft skill,
Yeah.
you know? Like,
Yeah.
who are we talking to? What are they doing, right?
Mhm.
When you are investigating these supply chains for the
Mhm.
first time, you know, whether they're new or established or you're wanting to add a new piece, how does that happen? Does someone go to some faraway place, or maybe they're not all far, like cattle? I know a lot is produced in the United States, right? But
Yeah.
the Thai rubber farmers, for example,
Yeah.
did someone from your company go there, or like how does all that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's critical to go there and like actually form those relationships and also like build trust with the farming community because
Right.
they're used to getting kind of jerked around
Yeah.
by companies. And so especially with that rubber project, it's it's like it's folks in Thailand that typically aren't connected to brands.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of kind of like relationship building and development. That project started, so there's kind of an interesting through line from my UNH internship to that project. So in the internship, when I did a life cycle assessment on Timberland's rubber boots, what we found was that the natural rubber, so the rubber in the boot is a mix of natural and synthetic rubber and a bunch of different like additives. And we found that like when we looked at all those ingredients that go into the rubber boot, natural rubber was either the most sustainable ingredient or the least sustainable ingredient, all based on how it was sourced and if it led to deforestation. And so I ended up doing some work and getting involved with some industry groups, kind of like sharing this information and basically sharing with other companies that like this is something that as an industry we need to like look at and solve, and ended up going to a like a conference in Thailand that was hosted by Mighty Earth and the Rainforest Alliance, so two kind of like nonprofit organizations, and they were bringing together a bunch of tire companies, and I think we were the only footwear company at the time, and just sharing like, here are the issues with deforestation and rubber, here are some of the things you can do. And one of the speakers there was this farmer from Thailand that was, everyone else was talking about, just like we said before, they were talking about like being a little less bad.
Yeah.
They're talking about like, okay, let's like grow rubber in a way that's still a monoculture, still conventional,
Right.
but like we won't deforest, which is still way better than what's happening.
Yeah.
But there was this one farmer talking about regenerative rubber and like that, like really like restoring, healing those landscapes. And so I connected with them there, got to like visit the farm, and then started basically like introducing them to the timberland teams and working with a consultant that would help to kind of like organize the farmers and form cooperatives that we could then tap into as a company.
Pun intended. Tap.
Oh, yes. I didn't mean it.
Were people, was your sense, right, that for the first time that you saw this guy speak, were people floored by it? Like, did this guy get hounded by everyone at the conference, or?
No, which is surprising.
Right.
Like, because I think a lot of the companies there, really large tire companies, they were just getting introduced to like the fact that there was any problem.
Yeah.
I think like we were at a point where we know there's a problem. We want a solution. And we see the opportunity. I think there's also like, especially at the time, Timberland, was willing to kind of like take this like long-term view of like, yeah, this is really small scale and niche right now, but there's an opportunity here to like scale and replicate this, and use it as like a kind of like a signpost, like a pathfinder. Like,
right.
Yeah, it's small, it can't like supply all of our rubber, but like it's something that we can test and learn with and hopefully like scale over time.
Yeah.
And like, which I think is super exciting now, like that project has grown significantly. It's used throughout, like not in every product, but it's been adopted by North Face, Vans, which are other companies owned by VF Corporation, but then also like some other really large footwear companies, and are starting to come around it, and they're forming what's calling a Regenerative Rubber Alliance. So it's really like scaled,
and that was because of you.
I mean, there is,
I'm sure there's more to it, and you're going to be humble, but like, wow, like this I feel like is so much of entrepreneurship, right? It's not even like inventing the thing, it's just bringing the different pieces together, and like, you did that.
But yeah, I think it's a great, to me, like I love pointing to that example because there's so often this like dichotomy of anything that's like really sustainable and regenerative, like, oh, it can never scale, or like, so we have to water it down, we have to like make it just like really incremental change, a tiny bit more sustainable, that's the only way it's going to scale. There's always this like debate of do you do something that's like really super sustainable, or do you do something that's like kind of maybe sustainable but at scale?
Right.
And I love pointing to this example that's like, no, both of those things can exist. Like this is both the most like North Star, like regenerative, sustainable way of producing a material, but it also like can replicate and scale, and it is replicating and scaling. So I just love pointing to that example.
Well, it shatters the scarcity kind of illusions, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So many of these markets even, right, might be under these impressions. Hey, this is the way we've done it for a long time. We don't want to tweak it.
Yeah.
It's costly to innovate. It's costly to experiment. But there's a price to not doing anything too.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
You know, like where's the value there? Would you say that your niche for supply chains is footwear, or is it more things than I can even think of?
So now, like with public good provisions, kind of the whole idea, and just where my business partner was in the food industry for like 20 years, the whole idea is it's like bridging
Yeah.
footwear, apparel, and the food industry.
Gotcha.
So I'm learning a lot about the food industry.
Yeah.
Because we're working with both food companies and apparel companies, helping them navigate the regenerative landscape, and then like finding those opportunities to match make between them.
Yeah.
Where they can form partnerships and cost share, burden share, building these new supply chains.
Right. Wow.
I'm really interested personally just in the food side of things. There's really cool science and research coming out on the nutrient density in regeneratively grown crops and just how much more nutrient dense they are than conventionally produced materials, because basically like the nutrients has to come from somewhere, and it comes from healthy soil.
Yeah.
When your soil is basically just dirt and there's no life in your soil, there's no nutrients in your food. There's really interesting research from an organization called the Bionutrient Food Association, I believe, where they basically like measured the nutrient density and like really complex nutrient density, not just like what you see on a nutrition labels. Like they're looking at the like phyto and micronutrients and all the things that we're just learning have like really important impacts on our health. And they found that like basically like a carrot is not a carrot is not a carrot. Like there were differences of like anywhere from like 4 to 16 times. Like you would have to eat, I don't remember exactly what it was different for each one, like blueberries, carrots,
Even
whatever.
2 is a lot.
You would have to eat like 8 conventionally grown carrots to get the nutrient density of 1 regeneratively grown carrot.
Wow.
And they're doing the same research now in beef, and like the omega-6-3 ratios in beef, which are really important for health. They're like really bad ratios. I don't know the exact numbers. Really bad in conventional, and with regenerative, it's like actually has, so like all of the it actually has positive impacts for you. So like all of the negative impacts people think about of like eating beef, they're not a result of just beef is bad.
Yeah.
It's like this whole thing of it's not the cow, it's the how.
Right.
If they're raised right, it actually is healthy for you.
Sure. Gosh.
And I think that, just to finish on that point, like I think that is why I'm excited about that, is both because like I really love food and also this guy Dan Kittredge, who leads the Bionutrient Food Association, like he's doing this really in-depth research. It was actually just published in Nature recently, but he often says like our most advanced like nutrient density instrument is our taste buds. Like you can taste, like if you eat like a garden grown tomato,
it's
like,
so different.
It's so much better, and it is better for you. But that's why I also think it's exciting, is because I think that is gonna, as this information gets out, and there's also a lot of innovation in nutrient density testing. So on the market relatively soon, like consumers are going to have the ability to, with like a flash of light, scan like products and see how nutrient dense they are.
I'm going to scan you. Every time I see you.
Perfect.
You're going to get
drink
scanned.
a lot of chaga. Hopefully get good results. But I think that is going to be so disruptive to the food industry, and really make it so that consumers are demanding regeneratively grown products. And so it's not going to be something that companies have to think twice about doing. It's going to be like, if they want market share, they need to be sourcing regeneratively.
Yeah. Putting power back into the hands of the buyers, right?
Exactly.
Who doesn't love that?
Mm-hmm.
Zach, for the last couple weeks, and like I mentioned in the beginning, you and I are friends, but you have been dropping all these bizarre hints to me over text about the big night this, the big night that, and you're so cagey about it, and you're like, no, I have to save it for the podcast.
Yes.
We're here right now.
Okay.
What the hell is the big night?
It's finally time. I've literally...
You're going to make up another excuse not to tell me.
I should. No, it's for episode 2 in the sauna. I can't tell you now.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Maybe you only tell me half of what it is.
I've been literally dying to tell you about this, and it's basically been all I've been
doesn't
talking
feel
about.
that way.
I've been restricting myself, but it's basically been all I've been talking about to everyone else I know for the past couple months. So yeah, I'm trying to think like how to work this into the rest of our conversation. So it actually is relevant because we talked about just like getting people.
I'm not editing this at all.
Good. Getting people excited about like sustainability and actually like want to do this work or whatever, consume in a more sustainable way.
Yeah.
I think that, like we talked about earlier, it's like all about connecting people with like the wonder and awe of nature. And the big night, I think is like such a great example of this. So this is something I learned about in high school and then completely forgot about until like a couple months ago, and reached out to our good friend, Ian.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what made me think to reach out to Ian.
Sustainability Brews.
I get that, like
our networking group.
Yeah, Ian is a friend of ours that works in sustainability, but I just randomly texted him, being like, "Do you know about the big night and how one might volunteer to be part of it?" And he like got back to me from, I think his wife had the information like instantly with like exactly how to do that. And it was incredible. But so, okay, the big night is basically every spring, the first warm rains of spring. It actually happens over like a few big nights, but it happens every year. And it's the first warm rains of spring. I think it has to be like over 45 degrees and raining at night. Those are like the conditions, and the ground has thawed.
Okay.
When that happens, basically every amphibian wakes up from their winter hibernation and migrates to like vernal pools. So it's like one of the largest animal migrations that like happens, but it just happens silently in the night, so like nobody knows about it.
Yeah.
And this just like restored my faith in humanity. You can volunteer to help the like salamanders, frogs, and toads cross the street. Because in their migration path, there's often like rural roads, and there is like a significant mortality rate when they try to cross rural roads. And so there's this place in Keene, New Hampshire, I think, called the Harris Center, and they basically like organized tons of people to form groups and like go all over New Hampshire and help salamanders cross the road. It's amazing.
This is extraordinary.
I know.
How have I never done this?
I know. It's the greatest
We
thing
need
ever.
to do it every year for the rest of our
Yes.
lives.
And it's so it's just like super fun.
Yeah.
It's like, so I forget which ones, but like I learned so many cool salamander facts. The Harris Center, huge shout out to them. They do such an amazing job like training volunteers and just making it like super easy. They also teach you like tons of cool amphibian facts. Like there's a toad that we saw a bunch of that freezes solid during the winter and then just like thaws and reanimates.
Like it's nothing.
Like it's nothing.
Like he's from the past.
Yes. And there's also, so spring peepers, you see a lot of those. They have one of the largest like body size to noise ratios of any animal. They're these like tiny little
I
frogs.
want to see that chart.
Yeah.
Who are the heavy hitters
I
on
know.
that chart?
They are a super heavy hitter. So they're like these tiny little frogs, but like up close, they are like louder than a jackhammer, which I just think is cool. They also, we helped like a bunch of yellow spotted salamanders get across the road, and they are, like they live like 95% of their life underground. So it's like kind of a rare opportunity to see them, and you just get to like help them cross the road. It's so great.
And this all happens, well, you said a couple nights, but
yeah,
the big night.
the big night. So now you know.
We're just going to do an episode like live from the big night.
Yes.
You know,
It's become like a core part of my personality.
it's 100%. If I'm going to go around, if I'm going to interview people, that's going to be the event next year.
So good.
That's the greatest thing.
It's so, and also just talk about issues that like bring people together.
Yeah.
So I posted on actually the first night that I went, someone called the police because I just went out alone, and so I fairly
This dude's
like there
out
was
here
like a
touching
weird person
reptiles.
just like
Yeah.
wandering this like dark road.
You weren't on a team? They didn't assign you a team or something?
So this was I was gonna organize a team, so I wanted to go to the site first and like check it out. But the police
Scoping.
came. They were super nice. They were just like, "What are you doing?" And I like explained it to them, and they were like super interested. But they were like, oh, "Okay, yeah, maybe just like post on the town Facebook site so like people know
Sure.
like, what's going on." And so I did that. And this town Facebook site, like it's like any town Facebook site where like you know
Yeah.
it's like kind of contentious. It can be contentious.
It's
like
just the local,
people,
it's the town
you know, like
crying
arguing.
word.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of like, it's actually overall, it's pretty good. There's a lot of like whatever positive posts on it.
Yeah.
But like any town, there's like some like you know debating different things, whatever.
This guy cut me off at the
Yeah,
intersection.
yeah, that type of thing.
Find
Complaining
him.
about potholes, whatever.
Yeah.
Like any town. But I posted about this salamander thing in like overwhelming support. Like salamanders are a bipartisan issue. Everyone wants to help them cross the street. It was just like so nice.
See,
and
that's
funny.
it though, you know? Like that this is the perfect example of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like getting people excited
Mm-hmm.
in a way that they can, in this sense, literally touch and experience.
exactly.
Right? About, wait, I want to help the they need my help. Those
Yeah.
salamanders need my help, right?
Hell yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean, that's extraordinary. I'm
Mhm.
so glad you shared this with me.
Yes.
I mean, I was going to ask, like, the final question I always ask is, you know, tell me something that makes you optimistic about the future of your work. But that's a pretty darn good one.
I'm gonna
Everyone wants to talk
that takes
help
the cake.
salamanders.
That takes the cake for sure.
You did it.
That's it.
I can
I'm
wrap it up.
sticking. I'm sticking with the big night. Sticking with salamanders.
No, it's great. All right. Well, Zach, it's been a real pleasure
Yes. Thank you for having
to
me.
have you on Granite Goodness.
This has been great. Thanks for doing this.
And you'll come back and here's what we'll do. We'll sauna on the big night,
Yes.
and then we'll hit the streets.
That's perfect.
That's going to be your return.
I love it. That sounds great.
Hey there. Thanks for spending some time with us, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. You can learn more about today's guest and how to get involved with or support their work in the show notes. If you'd like to suggest a guest for the show or have any story tips for our Good News in New Hampshire newsletter, shoot me a message at hello@granitegoodness.com. Music for this episode was provided by the band Sneaky Miles, who hail from Newmarket, New Hampshire. Until next time, I'm the creator of Granite Goodness and the host of the Granite Goodness podcast, Andy DeMeo. Thanks for listening.